Today, I'm going to be talking about a published paper that miraculously combines together my personal studies in the last few years in a way that I never thought I would even see connected together. So I want to present that to you, obviously. I think it's fascinating. And just to give you a taste, it brings the ivermectin into the story. It brings the vagus nerve into the story. I've also been studying lots of information about spike protein and how that can be damaging to a person and how you can detox from spike protein. It brings that into the story. And we will even touch upon IgG4. I've been studying IgG4 antibodies ever since they showed up in mRNA vaccinated individuals. It's the most common side effects of the mRNA vaccines that have been used during the pandemic. Almost everyone seems to be producing these unusual IgG4 antibodies. There's even connection to this. So very fascinating. Obviously, when I share this with you, my name is Dr. Mikola Vrashik of Neurogenomics, and let's get started. And the first thing I'll mention is that this video is sponsored by Parasym. It's a company that makes vagus nerve activation device. Oh yeah, look at that. I did actually turn it on because I'll be talking about it later on. You'll see how it's connected with this particular paper. And this is, of course, a device that can be used to electrically activate your vagus nerve. If that's of interest to you after this video, check it out. Very fascinating stuff. All right, so then next thing I want to mention is the author, one of the authors, I'm going to leave that mess. One of the authors of the papers, of this paper, someone I already covered before over an article that was retracted for her hypothesis. So she brings brand new hypothesis here. So this is untested territory, but brings a lot of connecting points together. So you can see how all of this could be connected together, that by sheer coincidence connect so many of my individual fields of study that all capture my interest one way or another. And that paper that I covered before about what she was discussing in that publication was how ivermectin might be promoting its beneficial effects by stimulating growth of these beneficial bacteria in your gut. So promoting healthy microbiome in your gut by being a food source to this specific type of bacteria, especially Bifidobacterium, I believe is the family. And crazy enough, this paper got retracted, which the reason why for me that was crazy is because it was retracted for promoting a hypothesis, which is just unusual. Science is all about hypothesis. And the whole purpose of it is let's keep always inventing new hypotheses so we can discover new scientific information. That's kind of like the standard. So that was very unusual, but she did something else. She does not talk about ivermectin being food in this article. She talks about how biochemically ivermectin might be potentiating certain biological pathways that are promoting that bacterial growth. So forget about the food source. This was Dr. Sabine Hazam, I believe, was her name. And in the past, when I studied her information, my understanding is this is her area of expertise, microbiome. So this is not something that she's stepping out of her own realm of comfort here. So hence, I was fascinated by this particular article, and the biochemical pathways that we'll discuss, I believe that came from other group of scientists that she combined forces with in order to produce this review. So let's break this down then. First of all, let's introduce then the vagus nerve, because, let me tell you how she even calls this hypothesis, because that's actually very interesting. She calls it cholinergic eubiosis. And as foreign and exotic as this may sound, the name actually tells you what it's all about. So what is eubiosis? It's the opposite of dysbiosis. So we're talking about your microbiome dysbiosis. So microbiome dysbiosis is when you're sick. Your microbiome is just not healthy. That's dysbiosis, and that will lead to your whole body sickness. Then eubiosis will be the exact opposite. We're talking about healthy microbiome. This is what you get when your microbiome is top notch. It's functioning the way it's supposed to be, and it's promoting your overall personal health. Okay, so that's eubiosis. Then cholinergic. When you hear the word cholinergic, that's automatically is a signature that acetylcholine is going to be involved. And acetylcholine is the chemical that vagus nerve uses as its communication language. So whenever, and remember, vagus nerve communicates with practically your whole body. Like it innervates so many of your organs. And at the tips of all the body areas that it reaches, it whispers to the body via this language of acetylcholine. One of its powerful arms is that it affects the immune system in a very powerful way. It subdues the inflammation, and it does that because immune cells, such as monocytes or T cells, regulatory T cells, they will have receptors on them for acetylcholine, so that vagus nerve can directly talk to immune cells, and that's a specific information. And we're about to break it down as to what that information is. And this has been discovered more than 25 years ago. This is called cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway, and anti-inflammatory substitutes inflammation, right? Via vagus nerve and its action of acetylcholine. So this is important for the background here. So these receptors for acetylcholine, that's how the information gets from the nerve to its target cells. And what happens next? That's also important for us. So what happens afterwards is that the acetylcholine will attach to its receptor that it's supposed to be attaching itself. So for sake of simplicity, let's call it acetylcholine receptor. And then whenever there's an interaction with the receptor at a cell surface, there's always, as information is passed down to the nucleus of the cell. And so there's like a chain reaction of events. That chain reaction of events is typically referred to as signaling pathway. And in this case, the interaction of acetylcholine with the receptor leads to phosphorylation of two proteins that are transcriptor factors. And once they're phosphorylated, it's like a switch mechanism, on, off. The moment you phosphorylate them, you activate them, you turn them on, and now they're functional. They can actually perform their function. And transcription factors are the proteins. Remember, I say proteins for me is equivalent to a robot, except it's an organic miniature robot. That's a protein. Transcription factor is a protein that goes inside nucleus and starts to activate specific genes. So these two transcription factors are STAT3, and the other one is AHR, and that stood for something like aryl hydrocarbon receptor. The reason why this is significant, because once you activate these guys, they have their consequences. This is always what happens with transcription factors, and why that signaling pathway is so powerful. You go from receptor on the surface of the cell all the way to the nucleus. Once you start communication of what happened at the cell surface to the nucleus, you have a powerful response. Genes are activated, and these transcription factors do exactly that. And what is being produced as a consequence of this entire activation, and this is what I'm getting to now, are specific cytokines. They are called interleukin 10 and inter-22. Now, what are cytokines? Cytokines is a form of communication that the immune system uses, so that there's lots of going on with the immune system. Immune system can do a lot of different things, and it coordinates its information via these cytokines. Now, interleukins is one. There's many different cytokines, many different interleukins. These are just couple that are being activated, but they're very powerful. They have very powerful downstream effects. And let me tell you about that now. So let's start with interleukin 22. So when you activate it, you achieve a couple of things. Number one, it's a very powerful cytokine that potentiates a lot of beneficial effects for the gut. That would be like the overarching summary. One of the ways it does that, it activates these T cells that are literally named after this interleukin. They are called Th22 T cells. And they have a very significant role in the gut in that they achieve a couple of things. They promote that your gut is not leaky, so everything is protected well, everything is tight. They really make sure that everything is healthy and working properly. So you want to have these guys around for that role. And that prevents, for example, any bacteria from your gut leaking into the blood, because that's a big no-no. That's when we start getting sick. All right, so that's one effect of this. And the other effect of interleukin 22 is that it can also help activating regulatory T cells. And regulatory T cells, I've been covering them recently in a lot of my videos, because I am introducing I'm studying new concepts of how regulatory T cells play a role in parasitic infections, cancer infections, how ivermectin plays a role in all of this in terms of its beneficial protective effects. And also I'm interested in regulatory T cells in the context of mRNA vaccination as well, because I believe understanding this background can help answer some of the paradoxical observations we have with regards to mRNA vaccinated individuals. So I made numerous now videos just on regulatory T cells. Now, when you think of regulatory T cells, the overall message is as follows. They help to subdue the immune system. They make sure that immune system stops recognizing whatever it's in its vicinity. I'm really simplifying this, but kind of that's the general idea. So think of regulatory T cells. They help to either cloak something from the immune system or just tell the immune system, no, don't bother here, right? And as a consequence, you want this in your gut. You want these regulatory T cells in your gut precisely so that your immune system is trained not to react to the bacteria in your gut, so that we are buddies and friends and we can collaborate together. And you don't also react to food, right? So that means regulatory T cells, as well as those Th22 T cells, they help what is referred to as tolerogenic environment. That's like a word that I'm using a lot now, because it all fits together. So tolerogenic means you're building tolerance towards something that would be an immunogen. An immunogen or immunogen, I think it's immunogen, is something that activates the immune system. So you're doing the opposite. When something is tolerogenic, it means you're teaching your body to accept it, tolerate it as it being part of you, natural part of you. We're not going to be attacking this because we're no longer seeing this as foreign. And clearly we want to achieve that in our gut against our symbiotic gut bacteria and food, right? So that we're not sick all the time, right? So that's why you want all of these. And these cytokines have also one more benefit. And the other benefit is that they promote growth of these beneficial bacteria called Bifidobacteria and Lactobacillus. And these bacteria are super good for you, super healthy. Normally, their association number is low numbers are associated with diseases, high numbers are associated with your healthier status. We want that as well. And once these guys are happy and activated, and partially why they are happy and activated is because of that tolerogenicity that was just induced so that they can thrive now in this environment. There's not an impeding environment for their happy growth. They are in a good state. Once these guys are in a happy state and they're being elevated and growing in your guts, they introduce many interesting positive feedback loops that potentiates everything I just said. So it's like a nuclear chain reaction that just things get growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'll tell you about that right away. But then let me just sneak ivermectin in here as well. How is ivermectin tied to all of this? Well, remember everything I just described to you was started via acetylcholine that vagus nerve pumps out, and that acetylcholine attaching itself to the receptors of the immune cells, and everything I'm telling you is the downstream effect of that. Well, ivermectin can interact with that acetylcholine receptor and enhance its effects. So you can think of ivermectin based on how they're describing is that it empowers the effect of the vagus nerve. It potentiates it. It makes it more powerful, more bigger. In essence, ivermectin makes the channel more sensitive to respond, and therefore it just enhances the entire effect. As a consequence, ivermectin is called an agonist. I think I lost my tracking. Let's do this. There you go. And so it, as an agonist is an opposite of antagonist. So agonist, it just elevates the function. So that's where ivermectin comes in. And I'll come back to ivermectin to also talk about how all of this might be tied to cancer as well, and why some people might be seeing ivermectin as beneficial for cancer. All right. Now let's go back to these Bifidobacteria and Lactobacillus bacteria, those beneficial guys. And they also have some knock-on effects that elevates and enhances everything. So number one, they also potentiate or influence more production of these cytokines, especially I believe interleukin-10. Now, why is that big deal? Because both interleukin-10 and interleukin-22, they also help to increase further phosphorylation of those two transcription factors I mentioned that started it all, the STAT3 and that AHR transcription factor, that aryl hydrocarbon receptor transcription factor. By the way, that transcription factor is heavily involved in protecting blood-brain barrier and the gut barrier. That's when that guy is activated, that's when both of these are well protected and you reduce the leakiness of any toxins into, well, either the systemic blood or the blood that goes into the brain. So they're powerful. And we're going to learn as well right away as to how, if you dysregulate this, how that can not only affect your general body health, but also your mental health. Very interesting how all of this is connected. And I've obviously studied mental health extensively by now from the angle of vagus nerve as well. All right, so that's one effect of these positive bacteria, is that they could potentiate through this. But also what they do is they also positively further regulate an enhancement of function of these regulatory T cells. So they promote that tolerogenic environment even more. So just like even it's protect us even more. So this is what I meant. There's multiple positive feedback loops that elevate everything. But then it's one more that I want to tell you that is very fascinating. These bacteria also start producing these compounds called polyamines. And this is really fascinating. The reason why is because polyamines are very healthy for us when they come from these bacteria. And this is where the story of your affected mental state might come in, because the level of these polyamines that are available to our body correlates with mental health diseases or their lack of. So if you have low polyamines, that can influence depression, that can affect anxiety, schizophrenia, versus if you have healthy amount of it, that helps these symptoms to go away. So what are these polyamines? Think of them like chains of carbon molecules, but they're dispersed with positively charged atoms in between. And the most famous three that I'm going to mention, and you're going to remember these names because they're so easy. They are putrescine, spermine, and spermidine, I believe. And so let's talk about these super briefly. Like putrescine, very weird name. It comes from putrid. So why is that? Because when body flesh, I almost said human, when flesh is breaking down, it's bacteria breaking down proteins. So muscle, for example, and proteins are being broken down. And byproduct of breaking down proteins, in a similar fashion we can do in our own gut but for fuel, for food. You can create these polyamine called putrescine, and it has this distinct odor, hence the name, right? But when our gut does it, when these bacteria in our gut do it, this is really good. This is very healthy. So hey, what can I say? If that same compound can add to the aroma of your farts, if you will. So if your farts ever are super, super nasty, like what a funky odor, now you know, hey, that could be your Bifidobacterium at work, and it actually might be sign of a very healthy microbiome. So you have a now excuse you can use. You can say doctor said so. So that's putrescine, and it's very good for the gut because it helps to protect the gut. It helps to enhance the mucus around the gut and so on. And that stuff is also very healthy for your brain, because these polyamines, they can actually enter your brain because they cross blood-brain barrier, no problem. And they have powerful effects, positive effects in your brain. So that's putrescine. That's putrescine also potentiates these effects we've already been talking about. So there's that. Let's talk about the spermine and spermidine. So it's also in the name. Why are they named like this? Because these two are loaded inside human sperm. There's lots of it. Why is it? Because it protects the cargo, the DNA. So that's where it's very, very good for that. And then once it's inside a recipient, if I can call it like that, and the sperm does its role, which is, say, penetrate the egg. The environment is good for cell division and so on. So that's where these two names come from, because there was the discovery process there. But spermidine, I remember connection to when I was studying information on spike protein detox, and spermidine is one of the most powerful activators of autophagy. So what's autophagy is the process that helps to remove either broken up stuff or degraded stuff or toxic stuff or old stuff from your body, that whether that's proteins or organelles. So even mitochondria, sick old mitochondria, can be removed through this process, although at that point it's called mitophagy. So autophagy is like a cleanup process for your body, very positive, very healthy for you. And when I was discussing spike protein detox, I mentioned spermidine as one of these potential benefits we can be looking at in order to help with dealing with the consequences of the spike protein. Why is this? Because spermidine, it really, not only does it also introduce this autophagy and you can remove toxic mitochondria, for example, it also is very good for proper healthy function of mitochondria as well. So this way, it's very has powerful effects. So now you can see how if these guys get inside our brain, they have such powerful positive health effects by protecting mitochondria. Your brain is superbly connected to the function of mitochondria, right? Like it's really dependent on proper mitochondria work. These polyamines suppress immune system as well. They help to suppress the immune system in the brain. So then all of these end up with healthy effects for the brain. It also affects how neurotransmitters work. And that's all the major ones. Glutamate, by the way, this is also where my audience interest of NAC comes in. It's involved in these same areas, but I'll be discussing that in a future content. It affects GABA neurotransmitters as well. So the gamete is involved in memory and learning. So you can see how disruption of this can lead to issues. It's involved in GABA neurotransmitters. Those are the ones that are suppressing. You start dysregulating that, you can lead to like anxiety issues, and also involved in making sure that there's proper dopamine and serotonin as well. And these, if you dysregulate, you can also affect the mood issues, and hence you can see how that can lead to mental health as well. So that's the knock-on benefits to the brain, and why when you have high levels of polyamines and you have a healthy gut, that can translate indirectly to your healthy mind state as well. Okay, so I wanted to tell you all of this from these healthy bacteria that have these carry-on effects of beneficial effects, and why ivermectin potentially could be such a wildly beneficial drug for not just parasites, which it could be targeting via how it regulates these regulatory T cells. I already discussed that in one of my past videos, but the same, everything what I just told you, protection of mitochondria, this is also a potential beneficial effect for cancer as well, because cancer is very well connected to dysregulation of mitochondria, right? And the last thing that I'll mention is that these Bifidobacteria, and Lactobacillus, they also the ivermectin, because of these effects of these bacteria, could have other antibacterial and antimicrobial properties, because of the fact that these polyamines can also help against that. And that could be another anti-cancer effect, because when you antimicrobial and antiviral, then you could also reduce inflammation. So lots of interesting connections. Now, I also told you IgG4 antibodies at the very beginning. Let's quickly connect that, and this is the end. And the IgG4 antibodies, well, I've mentioned interleukin-10 in all of this. These positive effects and so on, there's interleukin-10 is heavily involved in all of this. But IgG4 antibody production is also heavily involved, connected to interleukin-10 as well. One is required for the other. So you need interleukin-10 to promote the IgG4 antibody development. And while that has been well known, anyone who has been following my channel, you already know I've made many videos on IgG4 antibodies in mRNA vaccinated. I've studied at least 35 papers on this topic. I have at least 15 more on my desk waiting in my study of this topic as well. And one of these studies, I recall, was shown that interleukin-10 is required to produce these IgG4 antibodies targeting spike protein in the mRNA vaccinated. While in general, that is well known, it's surprising that only so far one paper only has confirmed that is the case as well with these anti-spike protein IgG4 antibodies as well that we see in post-mRNA vaccinated, which opens up fascinating new ways of thinking about all of this, but I'll be telling you this in another video. No way I can tell you this, but what a fascinating paper that connected all of this together. Now, actually, one last thing. It's because, remember, I brought up vagus nerve, right? So what was really, really cool is that the authors of the paper actually mentioned, well, in theory then, the vagus nerve activation could, in theory, have the same effect as ivermectin, because the hypothesis, this cholinergic eubiosis that they're proposing, is via activation of both ivermectin and the vagus nerve, because ivermectin potentiates the vagus nerve function. And as a consequence, they mentioned could be also beneficial. One of the major beneficial side effects of vagus nerve activation is its beneficial effect on its gut. And that's very well known, this connection between the brain and the gut, two brains of our body there that are not independent of one another, that both influence each other, except the brain does it via nerve cells and the gut microbiome brain does it via blood, by releasing its language into the blood. So nerves are very fast communication. Blood is still pretty fast. Like, it travels through your body very rapidly overall. So you can see this dialogue, and the vagus nerve is the nerve that sends the information from the brain to the gut. And this could be how the vagus nerve could be exercising its beneficial functions via promoting healthy microbiome. And this is why we might see so many positive effects of vagus nerve, including on mental health state, right? And they included an image, and the image was using the device that clipped to the tragus, just exactly like the device that I'm using right here. And by the way, I was activating my vagus nerve this entire conversation. Although I normally don't do it like this, I actually do this at night. I use vagus nerve activation right before I sleep because it knocks me out like crazy. It's actually wild. I put an eye mask on and I turn this on and I'm instantly out. The only other times I've ever experienced this is either if I take melatonin or if I'm exhausted. That it's wild. For me, it's wild. It's just like instant. Boom, I'm out. It's as if you put some drug in me that puts me to sleep. It's that, and it's instant. It's crazy. So I normally don't do it during the day. I do it at night to fall asleep, and I love it. If I need to go fall asleep right now, I have a crazy trick at my disposal. So I want to tell you about this because they use exactly same auricular transcutaneous device in their image as the device that sponsored this video and as the device that I sponsor in terms of promoting it, because I've studied it extensively, as well as the vagus nerve, and I think it's an amazing biohack. But as I just mentioned, everything what I just told you opens up a lot of new theories and how we could be looking at all of this from completely different angles. So I will be now exploring also new angles of vagus nerve. And the last thing I'll mention is that by learning this weird connection between vagus nerve and IgG4 development, it finally allowed me to solve a mystery that I've been trying to solve for a very long time. And this is how activation of your vagus nerve could be reducing autoantibodies in your body. I've been looking for an answer for this. I knew I would find an answer. I think I finally found an answer. This will be another video. Those autoantibodies, of course, are the antibodies you produce and you have in your body that attack yourself, right? And have your autoimmune conditions. And activation of the vagus nerve can reduce this. And I've been, obviously this is like, whoa, this is fantastic. But how? And I've been wanting to figure this out. Finally might be on the trail of understanding this. All right. This is so long, way longer than I anticipated, but I knew this is going to be too complicated to explain rapidly. So I'm going to bid you adieu, but please please subscribe, please leave a comment and check out my Patreon for two reasons. Number one is that you can vote for which videos on Patreon will come out on YouTube. This is how it works normally. And number two, you can also participate and you can be a free patron for this. You can participate in a conversation that I'm opening up with the community as to what do you think involves healthy living, so that I can make, based on community input, top 10 lists. All right. Bye everyone. And I'll see you in the next installment.